Good morning. Today is the 20th of June, 2013. This program, the Veterans History Project, is coming to you from the studios of Derry Community Television here in Derry, New Hampshire. My name is Bob Stevens, and I've had the pleasure of doing these shows since 2004. We've got over 120 or so in the can, as they say, and the best part about it, each one of them, although we're talking about the same general idea, has a special twist because it's history that's being reported by the people who made it. We're finding a lot of things, time passes by, that what they call it, spin, some of the activities is shaded, aborted, and we're told some of the countries are even wiping a lot of their old history books out because they don't want to remember or have remembered some of the things that went on during these wars. Today is another good program. Fellows volunteered, and I'll introduce him, and then we'll take it from there. Ray, if you will, tell us who you are, where you now live, your branch of service, and your days of service.
I'm Ray Brunelle. I live in Rollinsford, New Hampshire, and I was in the Army, and I went in November 3rd, 1950, and the Army retired in 1954.
Thank
the
you.
30th of May, 1954. Okay. April, I mean.
Now, where do you live?
Rollinsford.
Rollinsford, okay. Now, what I'd like to do, folks, we like to say before and after. This is way back when Ray was a youngster of 17 and his mother signed a piece of paper giving him permission to leave town for a while.
Yep. Yep.
Which leads me then, we go back to try and get a history as to what was your life growing up when you first
Well, I was in high school, Bourke Academy, and that's in South Bourke, which is just across the bridge. And there was 5 of us got together, decided we wanted to go in the service. So we got together and went to talk to each other's mother to help to get them to sign so we could go in the service. And we did, and we went in Fort Devens, Mass. And the next morning, the sergeant made us fall out, and he wanted volunteers to go to California. No one volunteered, so he says, all the B's come up here. So I went up, and he shook my hand. He says, congratulations. You're going to have a nice train ride from here to California. It was 5 days and 4 nights on a train, and it was awful.
It was, I know. Now, if you will, let's go back a little bit further. I wanted a little bit, how was it growing up when your family life and your brothers and sisters, anybody in your family, members of the service at any time, before you went into the service?
Yeah, my oldest brother was in the Navy. And then I went into the Army, and my youngest brother, next to the youngest, he went in the Air Force.
Well, okay. How's the best way to be nosy without being nosy? I just want to kind of find out, how was your life growing up?
Oh, very good,
kid,
very good.
No, what did you do? How did you do it? What was it like?
Well,
why did you pick the Air Force?
I worked on a farm.
Okay.
And all through grammar school, I had to get up early in the morning, jump on my bicycle, ride up to the farm, go up and milk the cows, and hurry up and get back home and clean up and go to school. And then after school, I'd have to go up and do it again.
Now, is that summer and winter or just in the summertime?
That was all year round.
Well, how the hell did you get a bicycle going through some of the storms?
Well, in the wintertime, I'd have to walk.
Oh.
Yeah.
Long
way? It was
way?
about mile and a half from my house.
Okay, so it wasn't too bad.
No.
Except when the snow was up to here, I guess. Okay.
Yeah, there was time.
Okay, now that you were in the Army and the sergeant gave you that trip west, what was your first reaction when you joined in as far as boot camp and getting your stuff, getting your gear, getting told what to do and how to do it? How did you feel in that transition?
Well, it was kind of scary at first, being shipped away off to California. And, but I was the youngest one in my outfit. And there was a couple of US's. It was a National Guard outfit, and they got activated. They were way under, so they sent people from all over the country to build them up.
Okay, to supplement them.
So we all took our basic training, and there was 3 or 4 guys that were USS and took me underneath their wings and helped
What do
me.
you mean by USSs? Initials
Well,
don't mean
they were
anything.
draftees.
Oh, okay. Tell us that.
Yeah, they were drafted,
Okay.
and so it was the draftees, the RAs, and the National Guard. Became
Draftees,
that whole
RAs, regular Army?
Yep,
Okay. Again,
that's what I was.
don't use initials because we don't know what that means. I'm kind
Oh.
of pusher for that. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Now you're in there doing your thing. How was it the first couple of weeks?
It was kind of it was spooky, scary, and but like I say, I had the older ones helping me through it and everything.
Okay.
and,
They kind of adopted you being
yeah.
the young guy.
yeah,
Okay.
and it wasn't bad. There was the sergeant and the officer in charge were very good and very helpful, and I didn't have any problems with
Good.
it anyways.
Okay.
No,
Very good.
I adapted very good to it.
Okay. Good deal.
Yeah.
Now, when you get to California, what camp did you go to start taking your basic and then primary? And
Camp
so on?
Cook.
Where would that
That'd
be?
be down in the Los Angeles area, in the southern part of California. You'd get up in the morning, it would be very cold, and around noontime you were looking for something to get out of the heat, looking for something to crawl under. I remember that very well. We took our basic training there, and then they took the whole outfit and took us down to San Francisco and loaded us on boats.
While you were there, though, in basic, what was your basic training consisted of? How long were you there? 10 weeks,
We
8
took
weeks?
4 months of basic training there.
Okay.
And like I say, we went to San Francisco, loaded us on boats, and went to Japan and took more training there. I think it was 4 months in California and about almost 6 months in Japan of more training.
Okay. Now, what were you training to be? A gunner, a marksman?
Well, I was in the
snap-
infantry.
Okay, a grunt.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. It was a gunner. I mean, and it was rough. The officer in charge was very good. He wanted us in top condition. He took us on all kinds of hikes. We went out on bivouac out in there and everything else.
In Japan as well as in
Both,
the States?
both
Okay.
to Japan and Korea. I mean, in California.
Did you have any special trainings as far as a rifleman slash
Yep.
radioman or whatever? How did you get your MOS and how did you qualify for it?
Oh, you had to go through all kinds of training. We'd put groups together. They'd be the enemy, and you'd be the good, and you'd try to overcome them, and be using blanks so that you didn't hurt each other. And then we went to the range a lot, did a lot of firing, so that you had to hit the bullseye so many times out of every shot, and there was all kinds of training.
Well, did you have anything other than just rifle, like small arms, machine
Yep.
guns, mortars?
Oh yeah, we had to learn how to take every weapon apart, field strip it, and put it back together, and clean it.
And then use it.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any training as far as having to use the enemy's equipment? Some of the outfits trained you that way. Japanese rifles or whatever, Chinese rifles.
No, we didn't get into that.
Oh, okay. That's
No,
just trying to find out.
It was just we were just trained to use our own
Now,
equipment.
where in Japan did you go?
What's that?
Where in Japan did you go?
Sendai and in Sendai. It was,
Okay, because I have no idea where it is
yeah.
up and down the country.
Then we moved to another camp, but right now it's beyond my mind.
Okay, it happens. I know
Yeah.
this guy does a
Oh,
lot of
yeah.
times. He's out to lunch for me.
Yeah. And like I say, I'm pretty sure it was about 6 months that we spent there before we went to
Okay,
Korea.
to simulate what you'd be going to. Now you went to Korea, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
How'd you
Yeah.
get there?
Yeah. Well, when we left California, the governor says we were just going to go to Japan for more training. We weren't going to go to Korea. But so much of that.
You know what that is.
Yeah. So anyways, finally they loaded us on boats and took us to Korea. We landed in Korea, and it was awful. It was so cold, and I said, I'm from New England. I said, well, winter back here is cold, but it was nothing like it was over there. And they loaded us in boxcars and took us up to Tent City. We all thought we was going to freeze to death for the ride up in that, because someone said it was about 30 below zero at the time. We got to Tent City and got off, and the Salvation Army was there, and they gave us coffee. And we grabbed the coffee and run like heck for the tents.
Get out of the cold.
Because it was so cold. And they told us, get away from the heat because you're going to get frostbite.
Yeah.
Because we were so frozen.
Now, where was Tent City located, up and down?
Tent City is way down in the southern part of Korea.
All right.
Okay. It's quite a ways from the line. So we went there to receive Antarctic gear because of the cold weather. So I'm pretty sure it was Christmas Eve they came in and they said, you're going up online. We all laughed and said, we can't go because we ain't got the gear. They said, tough. You're going.
TS.
And we went. Well, went by a truck, as far as the trucks would take us, then we started walking. And it was snowing so hard that it was awful. And I said to a guy, two of the guys, we were talking, we had a hold of each other so we wouldn't
get
lost in the snow. So I said to him, I says, you know, I said, I'm from New England, we have winters back there. But I says, in the wintertime, when it's snowing, it's warmer than when it's not snowing. And I says, this is totally opposite. I says, it's cold. It's as cold here in the winter, and when it's snowing, as it ain't when it ain't snowing. And we finally got up there, and the bunkers that we had were very good.
Did you have to dig them, or were they there with somebody else?
We dug holes and put logs over.
Yeah, logs and dirt.
Sandbags and stuff. And then for a stove, the 60 mortars came in a square metal container with a screw-on cover. We used that for a stove. Then what we did was we got a hold of some tubes from the 81 mortars, which were a long tube, and that was our chimney.
Okay.
Then we got a hold of some copper tubing, and the M1 can that the bullets came in for that. We used that for our oil can, ran the copper tubing down into the stove, and we took a stick and made it a point so we can control the flow of the oil.
And that was your heat?
And that was our heat.
What were you using for fuel?
And then diesel oil.
Oh, okay.
Then we got some logs, put it across like that, and we got a hold of some telephone wire and wrapped that around it, and that was our springs, and we put our sleeping bag on top of that so we didn't have to sleep on the ground.
Not too shabby.
Which was very good. It was, you could have it in any temperature you wanted in there. The trouble is, someone always had to be out in the trench. And it varied like heck depending on how cold it was, how long you could stay out. So there was two of you in the bunker, so you kept swapping.
Back and forth.
Turns, yeah. Sometimes you could go out for 15 minutes and sometimes a half an hour. And in the wintertime. And then when it weren't in the winter, then you could stay out there a lot longer, and it didn't make any difference. Both of you could be out there or whatever.
Now, how are the bunkers set up? Just two guys to a bunker, or do you have a long tunnel arrangement?
Yep, there was a trench, and it was, you were in there, and then of course the trench didn't go from bunker to bunker. You got out of the trench and went over to the next bunker, and
when you're visible when you're doing that.
Yeah, and in the daytime, when it was good weather, you could be over there visiting, and even though you weren't in the trench, you could always see.
Okay.
The trench was in case they were coming, so you had be somewhere to be out of the range of the fire, and And,
Well, getting rid of just some of the living conditions. Now, simple, you're two guys to a bunker, cold as heck, nobody wants to go out. How'd you take care of the body functions, if you will? How'd you get fed?
well, at first, until they got stuff set up, for quite a while, we had sea rations.
Okay.
They were awful. I mean, the only thing that I remember that was you had you had hash.
Yeah, the
And
ground eggs.
that was awful. I mean, it was so dry and everything that you couldn't drink enough water to go with it. The best thing was beans and hot dog.
Mm-hmm.
And they were hard to get. You couldn't swap with anybody.
Oh, no.
The hash.
The green, the blue, and the gray.
So that's what we had, and I think
no hot meals
it
at
took
all?
about we had that for about a month or maybe 2 months before we started getting decent food.
Okay.
Before they got set up, and as far as going to the bathroom, you just went anywhere, and you use your hard hat to wash up in.
Yeah. Take the liner out.
You'd use that, put water in it, and wash
Now,
up.
how'd you heat the water?
Sometimes we'd put it on the stove.
Okay, I just had to ask because a lot of times we had to crack through the damn ice.
We get the fire going, set that on top of it, and let it get hot. And then it was, before we went up, we had to all get more or less, not shave our hair off completely, but it had to be very, very
A
sharp.
buzz cut.
Oh, yeah. And then,
Why was that? To take care of the little crawlers?
then finally, they come up once and they says, they had a shower set up, and you go down and take showers. Well, what they had to do is they put on a timer, because once you get in there, it felt so good, the nice hot water and everything, that you didn't want to get out. But what it would do, you allowed, I think it was either 10 or 15 minutes the most, and then the thing was shut off.
Yeah.
And it would be so cold
You
that
had to get the hell out.
you got out.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was that part of it. Then finally we left that hill and we went to another hill. And that hill was bad. That was the furthest hill we were on, closer to the North Korean. And then finally we started doing different things and started going out on patrols. We went out one time and set up an ambush patrol. And there was a big valley there. And they told me to go over on this side, on the left, looking at the valley this way, on this side of the valley, and go up a little ways on that hill. So I did. And I was sitting there with a BAR, which is an automatic rifle.
Yeah, Browning automatic.
Yeah. And I don't know, how many hours we were out there. It's probably still about a quarter of an inch of snow still on that hill. That was in March. And finally, anyways, after being there so many hours, somebody was on my back. I got him down. He had a white armband on.
Somebody, is that Korean?
No, it was a Chinese. I found out after.
Okay.
It was a Chinese. And I found out later he was a first lieutenant in the Chinese Army. I got him off and I'm beating on him, and he hollered. The next thing I know, there was 2 men come down and they had their rifles right here at my forehead. So I got up very slow, and then he got up out of the ground, and he could speak English. And he was talking to his men, and there was a lot of shoot going on. He had more men up on top of the hill that was firing at my buddies. There was a couple of guys, 2 guys down below me, and then there was some there in the valley. They all took off and ran across that valley and got over with the rest of the guys on the other side of the valley get out of the shoot.
Left you standing there?
Yeah. So finally he says, let's go. And he said something to his 2 men. And I said, I don't want to go with you. And he says, that's too bad. He said, we got you and we're taking you. And I says, no, I'm going back to my outfit and I'm leaving. So I turned around to leave, and when I did, he said something. One guy grabbed my left arm and he's holding it. So I started fighting with him because I didn't want to go. And finally he said something to the other one, and he come over and grabbed my right arm, so I'm wrestling with the two of them trying to get away. And finally he comes over, and he stuck his rifle right at my head like that, and he says, either you cut this out or I'm going to shoot you.
Well, you had a choice.
So I stopped.
Okay, my good decision.
Yep. And they started, he says, let's go. And he said something to them. So they started hauling me off. Well, anyways, we finally got almost to the top of the hill. I could see about 15 or 20 more of them. And all of a sudden, maybe because I was staying all the time I was in Japan, I knew that the Chinese must be like the Japanese, live on fish and rice. And that came to my mind. And all of a sudden I said to myself, I ain't going to be able to live on fish and rice, and I got to get out of this mess. I gave a quick jerk like that. When I did, there was just enough snow on there. Both of the guys had me. They fell down and fell on their weapons. And the lieutenant was walking ahead of us, not paying attention, because he figured they had me. I turned around and I dove, and I rolled down that hill. I got down to the bottom. I got up and run like heck and got across the valley and got it back to my men. And they couldn't believe I got away. They said they saw the Chinese hauling me off, and they figured they was never going to see me again.
Oh, there, you did it.
But I did it.
Then what happened?
Then we got back to the lines, and got back to the bunker. And then it started sinking in my head what happened. And I got all bent out of shape. And my buddy in the bunker says, will you go lay down? And I said, I can't. He said, well, you're going to have a cigarette. And I said, I don't smoke. He said, you're going to smoke now. So he gave me a cigarette, and he said, you smoke that. So I'm puffing away on it and coughing and gagging. Finally, I finished that, and I'm still walking around. He said, you're going to have another one. So he gave me another one, and by the time I got through with that one, I said, I don't want another one. I'm going to lay down and
be quiet.
So I did, and the next morning they come in and they woke me up, and they said, the company commander wants you down in his office. And I said, I don't want to get up. You better get up if you know what's good for you. So I got up and I went down there, and they interviewed me about the whole thing, wanting to know how many Chinese there were. And that's when I found out that it was Chinese. At the time this all going on, I wasn't really sure. And then when they went out on patrol, but I couldn't go because I had to be being interviewed. And they found the guy out there that jumped me, and the white armband that he had on said that he was the first lieutenant in the Chinese army. That's when I found out who it was. And so, anyways, so that went on. Then this was in the very last part of March of '52. Then in April of '52, April 5th, they said that I was going to be being taken off the line, and I could either go South Korea or go back to Japan. Well, I was going to go back to Japan. So there was 5 of us, and the particular hill that we were on, the South Koreans put out 2,800 mines and never made a map of it.
Ooh.
So you always made sure that you stayed on a path. If you had a path there, the odds are that there would be no mines there. So there's 5 of us standing there on this path. And my best buddy from Cambridge, Mass, was on the left of me, and he was a draftee. And there was 3 more guys beyond me. One of the guys over here said something, I don't remember exactly now what it said, and my best buddy says, you can't do that, and he stepped off the path. He took his left leg and stepped backwards. When he did, he stepped on a mine. That went off, and I went flying through the air. I got up, and I'm just bleeding from everywhere. My arm is just hanging by the skin. My chest was all blown open, my stomach, my face was all blown up. And I got back to there, and everybody's laying there. And I said, I got to get help. Either that or I'm just going to bleed to death. So I started out for the Corpsman's bunker, which was up in the area we were, it's all hills, okay? And there's certain valleys, but you're on all hills. I started for the Corpsman's bunker. And I don't remember exactly how many times I fell down and got back up again. Then I was going, and I saw a guy walking across the hill like that. And I kept hollering for him for help. But after, somewhere down the line, after a long time, I got thinking about it. You probably couldn't hear me if I did holler, you know, because at that time I was so weak and so tired. I finally made it up there, and they couldn't believe I got there. They started cutting all my clothes off to put bandages on to try to stop some of the bleeding. Mm-hmm. And I was laying there on the ground, and they said, "We've got to get you on a stretcher." They tried to get a helicopter in, they couldn't get it because there's too much fighting going on. So it was either 4 guys or 6 guys took turns to carry me on a stretcher. But they said, "We got to get you on a stretcher." And I said, "Well, I can get on that." But I couldn't get up. I couldn't move no more.
You lost the blood.
I was totally had it. They picked me up and put me on a stretcher and started carrying me. They got me down to, finally got me to where the truck could get up and loaded me on a truck and took me down to the first aid station. I got down there and the chaplain was there waiting for me.
Oh.
And he gave me the last rites. And I told him, "Father says, I'm only 18 years old and there's no way I'm going to die out of this. And I just got paid a couple days ago and here's my money and I'd appreciate it if you take it and send it to me when I get to the hospital." So he said, "Okay." So anyways, they checked my bandages and said, "Okay," and they loaded me on and took me down to Tent City. That's where they do all the operations and everything. I got down there, and the doctors checked me over, and he told them, "Get him in there right away." He says, he's really bad off." So they took me in and operated on me. I was out for 7 days.
You mean unconscious?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And when I came to, I was blind. And I started hollering. The nurse come over and she says, "You're alive." And I says, "Yes." She said, "You're not supposed to be."
So take it easy.
They figured I would never make it and I died.
They didn't tag you, did they?
No.
Toe tag.
So she hollered and they came over and they picked me up on that stretcher, took me out and loaded me on an airplane on emergency and flew me down to the airport. Loaded me on a plane and flew me right over Japan to Tokyo Army Hospital. I got there. They started taking me up in the elevator, and something happened to the elevator and went crashing down. And I'm blind, and everybody's hauling on there, and that kind of shook me. But it finally got me up there. And being on a stretcher for so long, they put me in this bed. And because I'm blind, I can't see. There's a nurse and a corpsman in there, but I forgot all about corpsman. Well, actually, I didn't know about them that much because I hadn't been involved. And they were talking. And the bed felt like it was a king-size bed. And I thought, why, I don't know why, but I thought that I was going to have to share my bed with him.
Oh?
So I was hogging the bed. And the nurse kept hollering at me and saying, "Will you stay in the middle of that bed?" And I kept saying to myself, "No, I'm not going to stay in that bed. He ain't getting in bed with me." So finally what they had to do, they had to strap me down and put bars on the bed so that I wouldn't fall out of it.
You're an ornery old cuss, huh?
Huh?
You're kind of an ornery cuss.
Yeah, well.
Anyway, go ahead, I'm sorry.
So anyways, then I forget how many days later, I think it was the next day, the doctor came in and he said, "Do you know you were out for 7 days?" And of course I didn't know. That's when I found out. And he says, "You weren't supposed to come out of it, so your bandages were never changed." And he says, "It took 2 nurses here 10 hours to get the bandages off you."
Were they all crusted on?
From here, I had bandages totally covered from my top of my head right down to my hips. So anyways, they come in and they said, "You got gangrene so bad, the antibiotics ain't touching it." and I got to do something, and I don't know what to do. Otherwise, you're going to die.
Well, that's good news.
He said, I'm going to have a meeting with the doctors here and see if they can come up with something. And I'm going to call a couple of doctors in the States. So he came in and he says, we came up with something. I have no idea if it's going to work or not. And he said, but we're going to do it. And he says, I'm not going to put it on your records because I don't know if we could. But he says, it's the only thing we know what to do. So I don't remember exactly how many days later he come in and he told me that they had it under control, and I was going back on the antibiotics. So they put me back on. And they were going to cut this arm off at the shoulder. And they finally said, there's a doctor in New York that's operations that he talked to, and he'd like to come over and operate on it. He thinks he can save it. And so he did. He came over and he operated on me. He told me, he says, I got it back on there, but you'll never be able to use it again. But they didn't have to cut it off. And after he did the operation, I was in a wet bed for 6 months because they had to pour a solution over it so many times a day.
Like a big bathtub?
And I couldn't be moved.
Oh.
I couldn't be moved for 6 months at all. So finally the time was, one day one of the corpsmen came in and lifted it up. And I let a screeching howl on me. The head nurse came in and she said, what's the matter? I said, he lifted my arm up. She says, what? And I said, he lifted my arm up. After that, nobody was allowed in my room but her. And they called the doctor and they said there's nothing he could do for it. If it ruined it, they'd just cut the arm off. But it didn't. So they didn't cut it off. Well, anyways, I spent somewhere between a year and 15 months there bedridden. Finally, one day they come in, after they could start moving me, after this was healed enough. They said, we got to know how much you weigh. Before I got hurt, I weighed 180 pounds. They took me out, held me on a scale, I was 84 pounds.
Wow, that's a hell of a diet.
Yeah. So, anyways, I don't remember how much longer. Finally, they come in and they says, we think we get you well enough, and we want to take you back to States. And I says, good. So they lifted me out of bed, put me on a stretcher, took me down the elevator, took me by ambulance over to the airport, and loaded me on a big plane. At that time I could see. Load me on a plane that you could drive trucks up and down. They had straps hanging, they had my stripper and that. Had a nurse with me. We took off and we went to Hawaii. They landed and doctors come in, checked me over. They said, you're doing good. They checked me all over. I said, they said, okay. So we took off. I don't remember how long we were back up in the air. The nurse came in and she says, you're on a 4-engine plane. We just lost 2 engines.
Mr. Good News, huh?
She says, I'm supposed to put a life jacket on you, but she said, I don't know how I'm going to do it with you being in the stretcher. But we should have no problem. We've notified San Francisco, and we're going to be landing there. They got the runways all formed down and waiting for us. So we landed there. They got me off the plane, and they put me on another plane. We're heading down toward Texas. Got down there, and the engines on the plane weren't running right, and it was so hot down there, they couldn't keep the altitude they were supposed to be. They landed in a field. They did something to the plane, and we took off again. Got over to Alabama, and they said the plane couldn't go any further. So, anyways, they said you'll have to stay here for a couple of days. They put me on another plane and got me over to Fort Campbell, Kentucky hospital.
Where were you ultimately headed for? What hospital were you headed for, so there was some idea when you get there?
Fort Campbell, Kentucky.
Okay, all right.
I don't know if that was originally or what. I don't know, but I don't know why they went all around there and they just didn't take me.
That's what I was trying to find out.
That's the military. So anyways, I got there, and they did, I forget how many operations on me there. Well, they made me this ear. When I got blown up, it cut off that ear, and all the shrapnel went back here and busted my head all open. So supposedly my hearing was never going to be any good at all. But it did come back some, so I can do hear out of a hearing aid.
Okay. Oh, yeah.
But I don't hear that good. My biggest problem is a lot of times I don't understand what's being said to me. So anyways, my time ran out, and the Army extended me indefinite convenience to the government. And I says, what's that mean? They says, you're in until we decide what we're going to do with you. I said, okay.
They own your butt.
Yeah. So after being 6 months there and all the operations they did on me there, they said they didn't want me anymore. They shipped me down to Fort Eustis, Virginia. I got down there, and the hospital there said they couldn't take care of me. They transferred me over to the Navy Hospital in Portsmouth, Virginia. And I'm not really sure. It was either 4 months or 6 months there, and the Navy doctors said they didn't want me anymore.
Nobody wants you.
So they took me back to Fort Eustis, and when I got back there, they said, what are you doing back here? I said, I don't know. They said, we don't want you. So they put me before the board. The board said I was totally unfit for military service, and they retired me at 20 years old. But before I left, I met a colonel who was in my outfit. And he said he heard about me, but he was a different regiment. And he said he wanted me to go to work for him because being a prisoner and getting away, and he was going to give me some rank and a staff guy. It was either the next day or 2 days later he came back and he says, you've been before the board? And I says, yes. He says, they found you unfit for military service and I can't change that. He said, I want to shake your hand and wish you good luck. And so that was it.
Wow.
So I finally made it out of the hospital. I came home. I couldn't do nothing for over a year because I couldn't still use that arm that much or anything. Finally, when I was in Fort Campbell, Kentucky, I asked the doctor if there was any way I could get out because I hadn't been out of the hospital at all, and at that time I was starting to walk around. Mm-hmm. So the picture, one of the pictures you just showed, he says, I want you to go outside with me. I went outside, and he said, I want you to walk from this building over to that building. So I did, and back. He said, I'm going to let you go home for 10 days. And I said, really? And he says, yes. I said, oh, I was so happy to be out of the hospital and I was going to go home. Because I was getting to the point like I was feeling like I was going to climb the walls. So I told him, I said, I don't have any clothes to wear. So they gave me some clothes and I went home for 10 days.
Okay, let me show that picture right now. Whoop.
Yeah.
Well, I can do everything backwards.
Yeah.
There we go.
Those are the clothes they gave me to wear.
Quite a difference from that young kid that was there a few weeks ago.
Well, at that, the first one, the other one you showed, I was 17. And that one there, I was either 8, I think I was 19 then.
Oh, just an old man.
Yeah.
God.
Yeah.
Okay, now.
So I came home and they found out I was home, and a buddy of mine come over and wanted me to go to Dover to a dance with him, Dover High School. And I said, no, I don't want to go anywhere. I don't want to be seen by anybody. Because I still had to go back to the hospital. Still had operations to do on my face and everything. So him and my mother talked me into going. So we took the bus out of Southbrook to Dover and got off at the right there by the fire station in the city of Dover. We're walking down to the high school down the Central Avenue. We came to a J.J. Penney's store, and my wife was working in there. He took me in and introduced.
She was your wife, or the gal that was going to become your wife?
Going to become my wife.
Okay, it's a big difference, man.
Oh yeah.
It's a hell of a
oh
difference.
yeah. I wasn't married. No, I didn't.
Go ahead.
So we asked her if she wanted to go to the dance, and she said no, because she had to go home, shampoo her hair and whatever. So we left there and went down to the high school. We walked in there, and there was 5 girls in there I knew from grammar school that wouldn't give me the right time of day. But I didn't know about the write-up they had about me in Foster's. Okay. So as far as I know, nobody knew anything about me. So anyways, they were all over me. And I mean, it was making me, I said, my God, what's all this, you know.
So I said
so I said to my buddy, I said, let's go to the bathroom. So we did. And I said, if you want to, you can go back out there, but I'm not going back out there. I'm getting out of here. So we crawled out of the bathroom window and left.
Oh.
So we're walking back up to Dover, and he says, you know the girl I introduced you to? And I says, yes. He says, she lives right there, and he says, I want to go see her father. So we went in, and we went in there, and my wife she was shocked when we walked in, because she was sitting on the end of the couch, pin curling her hair, and she said it really killed her for me to see her like that. Well, anyways, we went out, I think we went out 3 times before I had to go back to the hospital for another year. And so then we wrote to each other all the time. And when I finally got out in April 5th of 1930, not April 5th, April the 30th, 1954 is when they retired me.
Okay.
Then she wanted to get married. Well, I also came home one more time just before that, too. That's right, I forgot about that. I asked, when I got to the Navy hospital, I forget how long I was there quite a while. And I asked my Navy doctor, I said, I'd like to go home for a couple of days. And he said, well, you know, you just can't just go home and stuff like that. He said, you got to be a Korean veteran or something like that. I said, how do you think I got all these scars on my body? And he says, just because you're in the Army, and he said, I'm in the Navy, he said, I'm still an officer, and he said, you got to show respect for me.
Yes, sir.
And I said, I'm sorry, but I said, I didn't mean it that way. So anyways, I figured, I said to myself, well, I guess I blew that. But no, he let me go home for 5 days. And that's when I was left there to come back to the hospital, is I wrote my wife got a card, and I wrote her asking her to marry me.
Oh. Proposal by postage, huh?
Yeah. Well, the mailman, she says, she lived upstairs, and there was a mailbox, a thing in a slot in the door, you threw the mail in, and he always do that. Well, he saw the card and he read it. So instead of doing that, he rang the bell.
Uh-oh.
And when she come down the stairs, he gave her the card. He says, congratulations, he wants to marry you.
Oh, that's
So anyways, that's, then we wrote to each other for, I think it was close to a year, 10 months or 8.
okay. She never came down to the Navy
Never
hospital.
came home again till, and I got out in April, and I couldn't go to work, and she was working, and she wanted to get married, and I said, we can't get married, I don't work. She said, I'm working. I said, well, we did anyway. We got married in July. And then when she got pregnant for my daughter, my oldest daughter, and it had to get done, my time was still up, and I told the VA I was going to work. The guy offered me a job. It was a nothing job, and I could do it with one hand. And so anyways, they said, well, no. And I said, yeah, I'm going to work. So I went to work anyways. Then finally, word got out, and I went to work I got into the Navy Yard. I'm working for the Navy.
In Portsmouth?
Yeah.
Okay.
And they were very good to me there. They, being on disability and everything, they gave me a labor cleaner's job. Nothing physical or anything. But as time went on, I kept working my arm and everything and building the rest of me up, and I could start doing things. I forget how many years I was at that. And I met a lot of nice people. In fact, one of my jobs was there. I used to have to go over to the shipyard commander. He had 2 hothouses. And open the windows, turn the sprinkler system on, and let the stuff get wet, then turn the sprinkler system on, then get lost for the rest of the day, and then at the end of the day, close the windows. I'm over there this one time, and wife comes out, and she says, I just made some coffee and muffins. She said, how would you like to have a cup of coffee and muffin? I said, I would. She says, okay, I'll come on in. So I said, no. I didn't want to go in because shipyard commander, I was, I didn't know if I was supposed to. So I said, no, if you bring it out, I'll have it. If you don't, she says, so he came out, and he says, how come you don't want to come in? I said, I don't want to come in. He says, who do you work for? So I told him my boss, and he says, no. He says, you're working for me.
Get your
butt in here. And I want you to come in and have one with me. So I did. After that, we became real good friends, and every Sunday I'd go there. I'd go in there and have coffee and donuts with them or whatever.
Good. You still do that, or is he long gone? Or?
Yeah. And then finally, my boss, on Sundays, I had a different boss during the week, but he was yucky. The one on Sundays was a nice guy. And he came over and he told me, he said, this is going to be your last Sunday. I said, oh, okay, because I had it for over a year. And I was taking all that money and putting it in the bank to build a house with and buy land. So he says, no, he says, I don't want to leave, but he says, he went to the boss and his boss and Hollis and my boss, and so my boss told me that you have to get done. So I said, okay. So I went down to shipyard commander's quarters that day, and he hollered for me to come in. I went in, and I says, well, this might be my last Sunday at sea. He says, how come? I says, well, I'm getting done. He said, get your money all saved for your house? And I says, no. He said, how come you're getting done? So I told him. He says, I'll see you in my office Monday.
Mm-hmm.
I said, oh, okay. So I came in that Monday morning, and when I came in, they, all the bosses, the big boss, the boss of the whole shop, the personnel supervisor, the secretary, they're all waiting at the clock for me and wanting to know what I did wrong down the shipyard commanders. And I said, nothing. They said, you must have. I said, no. They said, you must have did something wrong. We all got to be down in his office at 8 o'clock this morning, so don't you dare to leave this shop. So we did. We went down there, and the secretary went in and told him we were there. We went in his office. And he went on one side and on the other side, all over them. And finally, he just told me, he said, as long as he wants that job and I want him, he's on that job. And if you don't think I can't have you out of this shipyard, wishing you could come back in and work, try me.
Yeah. So you found an angel.
So then he called the secretary in, and he told her, he says, you see that man right there? And she says, yes, sir. He says, anytime he wants to see me, you make sure he gets in. And if he doesn't, it'll be your job.
Ooh.
So after that, I could do whatever I wanted. They didn't dare to tell me anything. Afraid I'd go see him.
Well, what have you been doing since then? Have you got physically all back?
And they finally goofed up down there, and I had a kidney stone attack, and I passed out in the middle of the road.
Middle of the road?
Yeah, down the yard. I was going off on a job.
Okay.
And the ambulance come over and picked me up, took me to the dispensary. I came to, and I told them I wanted to go to the hospital, and they said, you just can't take it down there unless there's something serious. I said, that's where my doctor is. They said, oh, good. They took me down to the hospital. Saw my doctor, and he said, you got a kidney stone that's blocking off the water to your kidney. I called Chelsea and Naval Hospital, and the doctor Love down there wants you there right away to operate on you. So he said, I'm going to call the Coast Guard and have them take you down by a helicopter. Couldn't get a helicopter, so he took me there by ambulance. Then he said, I got there, and they said, my wife called me and told me it was 3 days short my pay. So I said, called, find out what's on. So she called and he said, I left the Navy out of our permission.
Oh.
So when I get back out of there and got back down the yard, I went to see my doctor and I told him, I said, you messed me up. And I says, I lost 3 days pay out of it. And he says, what are you talking about? I said, you never notified my shop. He said, oh yes, I did, and it's all logged down. And he says, they're going to wish they never heard of us. So my doctor was a full captain, Navy captain. And he just got transferred from Washington down there. So he didn't know anyone that in Washington. So he wrote up a report against them and sending it into Washington. They were afraid they were going to lose their jobs over it. So they offered me all kinds of jobs to go talk to the doctor and have him drop the charges. And I said no. So finally they said, you go home and think about it. So I went back in the next day and they said, what are you going to do? I said, nothing. They said, how would you like to retire? And I said, I can't retire, I'm too young. They said, we're willing to put you out on disability, 80% of your pay tax-free.
Wow.
And I said, good. So I went down and see my doctor, and he said, Ray, I think that's the best thing, and you ought to get taken. Mm-hmm. I said, I did. He said, I'll even make out a report. He's come back tomorrow and get it. So they sent me down to the dispensary, and they decided what they were going to put me out on. And I told him, I said, you can't put me out on anything now that the government's paying me for. My disabilities.
Yeah.
And I said, okay.
Double dipping.
So anyway, the nurse told me, the woman wrote me up, said it would probably take 2 months. And I went down and see my doctor and got that report, and he said, bring it back, tell them to send it in with theirs. And you tell them, if they think they're in trouble now, if that seal is broken on that envelope, I'll know about it, and I'll really. So they said, oh no, we won't touch it. So they had to hurry up and get me out. So they took a guy and they flew him down to Washington. He carried the paperwork from office to office, and I was all done in 2 weeks.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was retired.
Now, I got to wrap it up about now. But what's your current status? Are you?
Well, I finally gave up in December.
Okay.
After I got out of the yard, I went into electrical business for myself.
Okay.
And it was very, very good. I had all kinds of work and all kinds of people want me to do work for them.
Good.
And I really liked it. But the VA had been after me, my wife been after me, and saying that I was doing too much and everything. Yeah. So finally I said, yeah, okay. And in December, I finally said I'd give it up.
Good enough.
So they said, well, the last time I sent in for my license, they figured I was too old and I wasn't going to be doing anything, so they didn't charge me anything for the license.
Look, I want to do this. It's getting near the end, folks, but I'd like you to see the little shadow box right here. And if you will, tell us about it.
Well, I got the combat infantry badge because I was spending combat. Yeah. And I got the Purple Heart, and the others here are just medals from the different countries, Korea, Japan, and what have you.
All right.
And good conduct.
Good conduct means you never got caught, huh?
Oh, yeah. And the one over here is the Bronze Star. So I was supposed to have been written up for medals, and I never got them. I had two different. I had the American Legion in Berwick check on it, and a Command Sergeant Major Air Force check on it, and they couldn't get nothing. They wrote to my outfit. They wrote in but I finally got a congresswoman, and she wrote in, and I finally got a report. They said that the time all this happened, my records that had been put in the building where they lost all the records.
Oh,
so they had nothing on me. So the Command Sergeant Major says, you deserve 2 medals for what you did. And he says, he got me the Bronze Star and gave me that. And I said, no, that's not. So then he wanted to get me the Silver Star, but he turned out, right after that, he had a heart attack and he died. And so I didn't get that. But since then, I've been down to Pease now. I'm a Pease greeter. And I've been down there over 500 times.
Okay.
And I got over 40 medals from coins. They're coins. No, not medals.
All right. Let's do this real quick. Ray was one of the, go, you tell him.
Okay, that's Flight New England.
Yep.
Yep. Sheila and Joe come to the prisoner of war meeting all the time, and they come up with this idea. So they took us, I belong to the prisoners of war. They're all Second World War prisoners that I belong to in Manchester. So anyways, they came over and they wanted to take us to there.
Arlington National.
We had to be up there on a Saturday at 5 o'clock in the morning. So I told her, I know in a hospital where there's 2 rooms, because there was no more hospital, where there's 2 rooms we could stay. And she said, there is? And I says, yes. So she checked in it, and she said, you're right, and they're all reserved for it. So we went up there on a Friday night. Paul, that's here with me, and Gerard. And we went up there on a Friday night, and Sheila and Joe took us out for supper.
Oh.
Saturday morning, we had to get up and get on buses at 5 o'clock in the morning.
Oh, yeah.
We come out, and there was, I'm not really positive now, it was either somewhere between 30 and 50 motorcyclists.
All numb to bits.
Yeah.
That's
and
quite a deal.
they were going to take, and then all of a sudden 4 motorcycles showed up for policemen. And we took off, and the policemen went and at every intersection and stopped the traffic so the bus never had to stop.
Yeah, that's great.
We got to the airport, and we had to stay on the bus until the motorcyclists got off. They formed 2 lines, and they were holding big American flags and hollering to us.
That was great.
That was fabulous.
Like you, I had the privilege of working, or not working, but taking that trip. Yeah. And it's the first time in 60 years I sat and cried. It was such a thrill. 2 words. Thank you.
Thank you.
You still got a good grip where you got your money, man.
Oh, yeah.
We'll see.
Well, my biggest problem, all my doctors tell me, is my pain tolerance is too high, and I don't know enough to stay down.
Okay, well,
that's what put me through it.
Okay, it has to be.
Oh, yeah.
Folks,
and the man upstairs.
We don't talk too often. I guess I'm going to have to wrap this, folks. Again, it's another guy who did his thing. For those of you out there who've seen the show and are convinced maybe it's time for you to share your experiences, please come and do it. Name is Bob Stevens. The address will be on the back. But more important, I've been told that this is perhaps one of the best gifts any one of you guys and gals can give your family, because when you're gone, they will still have this as a recording of when you were here. That happened to me 1 week ago, and I will never, never be happier than having done that. Again, I thank you for listening. If you will, come and see us and stay healthy.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
He came over and was talking with me. And July 10th.